Sound at its most basic level are vibrations through air particles, known as sound waves. These sound waves are caused by vibrations from other objects or creatures into the air in every direction, bouncing off surfaces, like how light behaves, and eventually reaching our ears. Our brains then process these sound vibrations into understandable noise, which we can distinguish between. Sine waves are the simplest and most commonly known of the sound waves, and the shape of them indicate what you can expect the sound to be like. The higher the wave, the louder it is. The more waves, or cycles, in a phase determines the pitch, while if you combine different phases, it will create a new wave out of the two. Imagine it as 1x plus 1y equals 1xy. It combines the two phases by adding them together to alter pitch and amplitude. The frequency of a sound is how many cycles per second a sound phase produces. The faster the sound source vibrates, the more cycles, and thus the higher frequency. Sound frequency is measured in hertz, abbreviated as Hz, and provides a general threshold for human hearing ability, with many healthy humans exhibiting the ability to hear between 20 Hz and 20,000 Hz. However, the generally accepted limit is around 16,000 Hz. Sounds above 20,000 Hz are regarded as ultrasound, and sounds below 20 Hz are known as infrasound. Both cannot be heard by the human ear. 1 Hz is equivalent to 1 cycle for every second, meaning that most humans may only hear up to 16,000 cycles per second, and a low of 20 cycles per second. Decibels, abbreviated as dB, are a unit of measurement for the volume of sound, or the intensity of sound, and can be compared to real-life sounds by a simple number. Here are some examples I've found. Most music within video games are commissioned for the game by the game developer. A lot like art within games, which are usually done by either a hired concept artist or a commissioned artist. It is possible to just create the tracks yourself, or use stock music / sounds from a stock library, or use music in public domain. However, a lot of music or sounds in stock libraries, such as YouTube's audio library, may require you to at least credit their music, which is the least you can do regarding the circumstances. A song can have multiple copyrights attached to it, with the lyrics, composition, and the recording itself having separate copyrights, and even multiple copyright holders attached to them. As a game developer, you would need to gain the permission and possible licensing to use said song in your game. Going back to when I had mentioned commissioning music, if you do commission someone for a music track, you will have the ownership of the recording of the track from the moment you pay for it. However, you may only have a license to use the actual musical composition that the artist made. Copyright law states that something that has copyright attached to it does not have copyright forever, as it expires after a certain period of time, dependent on the year of publication and creation. Anything created after January 1st, 1978 has copyright for 50 years from the moment the creator of said work has passed away, while if the work was created before January 1st, 1978, it is protected for 75 years from the day it was first created. This means that when these works' copyright protection has expired, the work automatically enters public domain, meaning that it is accessible to use from everyone and is completely free from copyright. As such, historical works of artists such as Beethoven, Mozart, Tchaikovsky, and Schumann are all a part of the public domain, so anyone may use their works for free. Atari's Pong, released in 1972, is probably the earliest form of video game audio that there is. The name Pong itself, as the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines, it means a hollow ringing sound, which I would say isn't too far from the sound we actually hear within Pong. It's a very sharp, robotic sound that is very unpleasant for the human ear and can easily be recognized as one of the earliest forms of audio within video games due to how simple and almost primal in the face of modern music and audio in video games of this generation are. Journey's soundtrack is, in simple words, magically elusive. It beautifully entrances you with its natural Middle Eastern Egyptian instruments and music, coupled with a hint of futuristic dystopian atmosphere and elegant sandy ruinous visuals to sell you a carefully wrapped illusion of a sandy post-apocalyptic game filled with ancient Egyptian aesthetics and an old alien race that long passed away into another plane of existence. For this section, I chose to go with the song Reset for the Okami game, as it is a good favourite of mine. Despite never playing the game itself, I know the art style well, and the art style is definitely linked with the music, with its East Asian ink painting aesthetic, classical Japanese architecture, and the name itself, Okami, meaning Great Spirit in Japanese, and the fact the full name of the main character is Okami Amaterasu, of which Amaterasu is the sun goddess within Shinto Japanese mythology. And if you know Japanese mythology, you will know that Amaterasu is regarded as the goddess of creation and the embodiment of modern Japan, as well as being the ancestor of the Japanese royal family, which, by what the royal family claims, gives them the divine right to rule over Japan. Gregory Wright from Mythopedia.com says, Amaterasu is the Japanese sun goddess, daughter of creation deities Izanagi and Izanami, and central to the Shinto religion. It is from her that Japanese nobility claims descent and their divine right to rule. Now, the music itself inherits a lot of its instruments from classical East Asian music, with instruments such as flutes, hooked instruments, and light piano-style instruments. In short words, it stays true to the culture from where it originated and is set to give the player that bit more immersion into the style of the game. Before I get into the analysing part of this, I do have to say that in my subjective opinion, Civilization's soundtracks are the magnum opus of the rich and colourful series of which it is a part of. Civilization 6 offers many different soundtracks depending on the country the player has chosen to play as, and as you progress through the ages and become more and more prosperous, the music becomes richer and upbeat, to the point where the slow and quiet music you started in the year 4000 BC becomes this colourful, vibrant, orchestral masterpiece in the modern era that is almost unrecognisable from that slow weak piece you may have heard a few hours ago. In this example, I'll be looking at Australia's, Russia's and Scotland's themes and how they progress throughout the eras. One thing you'll definitely notice when we talk about the progression of these themes is that the progression of each era directly influences the soundtrack used within that period of time. So you, as a player, will notice the music progress in volume, amount of instruments, the general vibe you get from the piece and how fast it becomes, also known as the tempo compared to the era before. The first thing we notice when listening to this piece is that it starts with a basic didgeridoo melody, then coupled with an almost sad and reminiscent violin play, of which the whole song bounces between only 2 or 3 pitches while playing a very slow Outback-esque cover of the famous 1895 Queensland bush song Waltzing Matilda by Banjo Patterson. One commenter stated, "Sounds like something you'd listen to next to a campfire out in the bush while the billy boils." This makes the music dynamic and visual for the average person, meaning that people can generally get the broad idea of where and when this piece of music is set, and what kind of emotion they should be feeling, which from the pitch, tempo and instruments used, should really give someone the strange feeling of reminiscence to a place they've never been before. A comment really stood out to me on this video: only the Civ 6 folks can make an old bush song, Waltzing Matilda, sound like it belongs on a montage about the history of space exploration. This is an incredibly wild change from the comment we saw on the ancient era theme of being by a campfire in the Australian bush. And again, it's dynamic in the sense that it lives up to the era that it's set in, as the atomic era in history is generally accepted as the current era, starting when the first atomic bomb, Trinity, was detonated at the Trinity test site in Nevada on July 16, 1945. It is also the time period when humans started to take the dream of space exploration seriously, the space race and JFK's famous speech, "We choose to go to the moon," which was the first time in human history that a world leader announced the nation's ambitions to land on the lunar surface. The theme itself is composed of many different instruments this time, notably trumpets, drums, violins, possibly tubas or trombones, but it still adheres to its roots of the didgeridoo introduction, symbolising Australia's Aborigine historical roots despite the huge friction between Aborigines and European white colonists. The tempo is much faster, the pitch is much more fluctuant, and the song generally much more exciting and hopeful, almost glorious in a sense, and epic, adhering back to the comment on how it fits with the history of space exploration, even though once again it is but an old bush song about a swagman sitting down by a billabong. The Russian theme for Civ 6 is the old folk song Kalinka, but incredibly altered to much less sound like the original fun version, composed in 1860 by Ivan Larionov, and much more dystopian and authoritarian, reflecting the current state of Russia at the start of the atomic era in reality, with the dark shadow of the Soviet Union presiding over all Russia, and the Stalinist government suppressing minorities and killing many in the infamous gulags. Something that is possibly related to the music is that Tsar Pyotr bloodline, and subsequently the Romanov dynasty ended with Tsar Nikolai II in 1917-18 when he was executed by Red Army soldiers in the Ipatiev house after being forcefully abdicated during the Russian Civil War, which the dark tones of certain parts of the music may hint to these deaths and attempted total eradication by Soviet officials of everything related to Romanov and Tsarist, threatening Tsar Pyotr's lineage and legacy. Scotland's theme, Scotland the Brave, is very different from Kalinka in the way it expresses emotions. It fills you up with excitement, joy and hope, using a mixture of low instruments, including the bagpipe. Very fitting for Robert the Bruce, a prominent Scottish hero that fought as King of Scots in the First Scottish War of Independence in 1306, notably the famous Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, of which English forces were defeated in a decisive Scottish victory, which may have contributed to the maintained Scottish independence in the Treaty of Edinburgh, Northampton in 1328. In the modern era, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has been pushing for a rightful independence referendum for Scotland to try and better themselves in a way they wish to govern, free from London influence, pulling historical heroes from the past such as Robert the Bruce and William Wallace as potential inspiration for national pride. In conclusion, this rendition of Scotland the Brave is beautiful, inspirational, and gives great hope in the player to give better the great nation they will be playing, and to maintain that hard-fought independence that people of the modern era so desperately crave and deserve.